It's the amazing Rico Brogna podcast with your host, Evan Roberts.
We're back. We're back. I think we're back. Feels like we're back. Season back on edition of Rico Brogna. Thank you very much for listening, subscribing, watching, enjoying, hating another edition of Rico Brogna. The New York Mets win a game that I have to admit I never thought for a second they were going to win. And it wasn't necessarily because of the loss the previous night. Look, the Mets have shown us all season long that they bounce back. They've had a lot of bad losses this season. They obviously got off to a terrible start. They bounced back. They had the awful May. They bounced back. They've had a lot of terrible losses throughout the season, and they've bounced back a lot. So my pessimism wasn't about last night. My pessimism was about beating an Arizona Diamondback team that doesn't lose a series at home, and also how they were going to manage to get the last 6, 9, or 12 outs. It turned out to be the last 6 outs because David Peterson, all hail David Peterson. A couple of weeks ago, I admitted on the Rico, I buy into David Peterson. Now we all have to buy into David Peterson because on regular rest, yes, but as Gary Cohen pointed out, sort of short rest because this was a day game as compared to his last performance. David Peterson against an Arizona Diamondback offense. Sure, they're missing Christian Walker and Ketel Marte, and they haven't been great against lefties. Sure, I get all that. But against a Diamondback lineup that scores over 5 runs per game, David Peterson went out and did what he's been doing since he came back from the magical hip surgery, and that's deal. And give this team innings. That's the other thing that I thought was really, really important in a game like this. You got a bullpen that's short a man. Dednell Nunez, see you later. You're on the IL. You have a handful of guys that have pitched in back-to-back games. You did have a fresh Jose Budo, who we saw in this game, but you didn't exactly have a lot of bullpen options. And to get 7 innings out of David Peterson was absolutely tremendous. Another stellar, solid performance by Petey. But let's get right to Edwin Diaz, and we'll get to other aspects of this game. We'll look ahead to the White Sox series, and hopefully one of my sons doesn't wake up. But Pete Hoffman's ready to go if he does. I agreed with Mendoza going back to Edwin Diaz. I did. And I'll tell you why. Even though under maybe different circumstances, I would have said, you know what? Jose Budo had a relatively clean 8th inning. Remember, he did issue a 2-out walk, which is a Mets specialty, to Jock Peterson, but he was late in the at-bat. He got caught stealing by a country mile. But Budo was Budo. He did his job, unlike what happened on Sunday. So you could have made the case with a 1-run lead after the Mets took it in the 9th inning to sticking with Jose Budo. But I'll tell you exactly why they needed to go back to Edwin Diaz. I said this yesterday after the horrible loss. I'll say it again with more time to be thoughtful and hopefully intellectual, but probably not. They freaking need Edwin Diaz. They are going nowhere without Edwin Diaz, especially now with Dednell Nunez on the injured list. They have to find a way for Edwin Diaz, maybe not to be 2022, but to be a reliable major league closer. And Edwin Diaz insisted yesterday and even today it was all mechanical. Not a mental thing. I didn't melt down because of the situation. It was a mechanical thing. And if that's the case, Edwin Diaz needed to come back and protect a 1-run lead against the heart of the Diamondback order. He needed to do it to prove it was just mechanical and it's been fixed. He needed to do it because, I still think he gave him the best chance to win this game. Jose Budo's control has been very iffy in his last few appearances, and he was rather fortunate to get the caught stealing. And you don't have any other bullpen option that's better, but they needed to test him. They needed to throw him out there in the biggest game of the season that they've played thus far. That'll continue that trend, biggest game of the season. In his biggest save opportunity, I got to tell you, maybe it's his biggest save opportunity he's ever had as a Met. And that may sound hyperbolic, but I guess what I would challenge you is name me the other save opportunity that was bigger. He didn't have any big ones in 2022, did he? I guess he did. Maybe late in the season, as they didn't win the division. The postseason didn't bring you any big-time Edwin Diaz save situations. So when you think about his entire Met career, and I'll take options for those that want to go back on Baseball Reference or their memory bank and try to find a bigger one. But considering where they are in the standings, we are in the calendar, the opponent, what had happened the previous night, yeah, I think pound for pound, this was the most important save opportunity Edwin Diaz has had as a Met. And maybe that says a lot about his Met tenure and what this franchise hasn't been able to accomplish. But they needed him. They needed him to respond. And honestly, he could have gone out, walked the bases loaded, struck out the side. If he would have survived, I would have been giddy. We all would have been giddy. But the fact he went out there against the middle of the Arizona order, and as the kids call it, he shoved and he dominated and he struck out Lourdes Gurriel and he struck out Josh Bell, his old nemesis from earlier this season. And he got Jake McCarthy to hit that little pop-up to shortstop. He was dominant. He was as dominant as we've seen him all year. For him to do that, not only did he protect an important game, which turned out to be a game where the Mets gained ground. They're back to being 3 games out of a wild card spot. So not only was important from a victory standpoint, but to go out and dominate has to at least relax some of us that maybe he's right and it was just a mechanical malfunction that caused what happened on Wednesday night to happen. That it wasn't a mental breakdown. It wasn't kind of like what we saw in 2019 where it did feel like it was mental late and not being able to handle the heat of the pressure in New York. And that maybe, fingers crossed, Edwin Diaz can be a reliable closer in the final month of the year. And look what I said, reliable closer. I didn't say dominant like 2022. I just said reliable closer. So that was very important. I'm glad Mendy challenged him. And obviously, I'm glad Edwin Diaz was up for the freaking challenge.
There was one other noticeable thing about today's performance, his pitching-wise. If I'm correct, how many pitches did he throw? Was it 17 or 18?
I think he threw 18 pitches.
If I'm correct, 17 of those were fastballs.
Yes.
One was a slider.
Yes.
And what were the 2 home runs that he gave up in the walk-offs? Or
sliders.
Exactly. So
well,
maybe something is wrong there too.
You're right, but remember this. In his performance the other night, he also couldn't command his fastball either. So while, yes, the slider was hit for the grand slam and the slider was hit on Sunday, no doubt, slider right down the middle, he was throwing his fastball the other day. He just couldn't command it. But one other thing I noticed, this one's for you, Hoff.
Ooh.
Pete made a comment, you may recall if you watched or listened to the Rico a few days ago, after Diaz gave up the game winner to San Diego. He said he looked very pissed at Francisco Alvarez. We saw Francisco Alvarez come in for defense in the 9th inning. So Carlos Mendoza not only said, F you, Pete, everything's fine between Edwin Diaz and Francisco Alvarez. He went out of his way to make the defensive move. Yeah, going to Harrison Bader, Tyrone Taylor was a pinch runner an inning earlier. That's understandable. He went to Francisco Alvarez. So clearly Alvarez and Diaz did not want to fight each other after the slider to Jackson Merrill on Sunday.
Did he want to fight him after the slider he gave up to Corbin Carroll?
He may have. He may have. Look, very, very encouraging performance by Edwin Diaz, and that's why that's the main focus to start. He delivered. He responded. I could sit here right now, and I did it too, so I'm certainly not looking down on anybody, and read a bunch of emails about Edwin Diaz, how he can't be the closer. They have to trade him. The contract's a regret. I am proud of myself, as pissed off as I was at Diaz. Hold on, I got to draft somebody. Wan'Dale Robinson. I'm sorry. I'm doing the last few rounds of a fantasy draft.
Oh, wait.
I feel good about.
Is Jalen Hyatt there?
I don't know. Dude, I was down on the clock. I'm doing a Rico. I didn't have much time. I saw Wan'Dale sitting there. I took him.
Hyatt's going to be the best of the 3. I'm telling you right now.
All right. Let me see if Jalen Hyatt was available. No, he wasn't. So, look, I didn't screw up.
All right. Good job.
I didn't screw up. I feel very good about my fantasy draft. I did reach on Garrett Wilson in the first round, but that's okay. Sometimes it's okay to be a homer, I think, in fantasy, because you want to have fun and you also want to root for your own guys. What the hell was I saying? Edwin Diaz, yeah. Oh,
yeah. Celebrate Edwin Diaz because he's the focus point.
Yes. As much as I ripped him, rightfully so. I mean, blew a brutal game the other night. I stopped short of agreeing with that email that we read about that contract is a mistake. and the Mets shouldn't have re-signed him. I wouldn't go that far, but we got to call this season for what it's been. It's been a very frustrating season for him. It's been a very frustrating season for the team. But here's the beautiful thing when you're in a pennant race. You have a chance, based on what you do in the final month of the season, final few weeks of the season, to make everything else irrelevant. Now, we've said that about Pete Alonso at a home run in this game, an absolute bomb to center that gave him the early 1-0 lead. Most of us have been disappointed with Pete's season. That's fine. But if Pete Alonso has a monster September and then it helps the Mets make the playoffs, all forgiven. And vice versa, too, by the way. Like, you could have a great year, you suck in September, and the Mets miss the playoffs because of you, or in part because of you. We'll remember it. So the good news for Diaz is, unlike 2019, where things got worse and worse and worse, and by the end of the year, you couldn't pitch him, Edwin Diaz has it right there for him. And he absolutely responded winning this game. Other things from this game. Pete obviously hits the home run, gives him the early lead. David Peterson's one mistake was before I even get to Randall Grichuk's 2-run home run, which was really his one mistake, or two mistakes. The mistake was walking Perdomo with 2 outs and nobody on. And it seems like that's such a Met thing, to have 2 outs and nobody on, walk a guy, and have that be something that kicks you in the ass. And I know that's a thing for every team, but the Mets have had such issues with throwing strikes. But David Peterson was so brilliant on many levels. He's not dominant. He's not blowing people away. He's not getting a ton of swing and misses. What David Peterson is doing is he's being efficient. He's making the big pitch when he needs to. A couple of great examples of that in this game. He's also shown the ability to pick people off Andy Pettitte style. Think about how significant his pickoffs were. He picks off Grichuk in the first inning with a runner on first 2 outs and Josh Bell at the plate. Never know what's going to happen. He picks off Jake McCarthy after he led off the 4th inning with an infield hit, 2 outs, runner on first base. So he wipes 2 outs away with his pickoff move. He gets a big double play against Jake McCarthy in the 2nd inning, 1 on, nobody out. That could turn into a big inning. And then really, his final pitch of the game was the balls, the stones that David Peterson has shown since he received this magical hip surgery. And that's getting the double play against Kevin Newman after the Met defense. Jeff McNeil tried to do a little bit too much on a little weak ground ball off the bat of Corbin Carroll. If you remember the play, there was a runner on first and 1 out in the 7th inning, and Carroll hits this little chopper to second base. Unfortunately, he wasn't getting anybody, and McNeil tries to very quickly flip it to second base. The runner, Suarez, isn't sliding, and the ball goes off of Lindor's bare hand. And because of that, it allowed, instead of first and second 1 out, the runner to go to third, first and third 1 out, which is kind of a problem when it's a 2-2 game. But David Peterson got the thing he needed the most, and that is an atom ground ball. Kevin Newman hit a ground ball right at Jose Iglesias, and they easily turn over the 5-4-3 double play. Huge pitch by Peterson, and that's really the story of him this year. He makes the big pitch when he has to. You know, you look at his numbers, and, you know, other than ERA, and his ERA is amazing. What is it, like 2.7 now? 2.75? Something in that range. Outside of his ERA, none of the other numbers jump out at you. His Ks per 9, his whip, his walks per 9. Like, there's nothing that just explodes off the page. But, man, does he know how to make the big pitch. Outside, again, of the walk to Perdomo to start the 3rd and the 2-run home run to Randall Grichuk. So, great performance by David Peterson. I said this about him a week ago. I'll say it again. This includes Sean Manaea, who's been wonderful. David Peterson is the most reliable starter in the Met rotation. That's what he is. He gives them innings on a consistent basis. He gives them 7 innings every 5 days. And I could argue, in fact, I will, why not? It's the Rico Brogna, that I would have had him start the 8th inning. I didn't see any sign, and his pitch count was 88. So not a very high pitch count. I didn't see any sign in that 7th inning that he was done. The infield hit to Corbin Carroll was horrible luck ahead of the count, and the error is what allowed first and third. He got the double play. I think the only reason that maybe they stopped was because of the fact he was pitching on the normal rest, or the slightly less than normal rest, and he's thrown a lot of innings over his last few starts. But they had 9-1-2 of the order coming up. I would have let him start the 8th inning, especially because I'm also thinking about Arizona's bench and how good it is, how many left-handed bats they have off that bench. Their entire bench is left-handed, at least in this game against Peterson, when Jock Peterson is really the guy that scares me. He should scare all of us. He should give all of us nightmares. So if you keep Peterson in to start the 8th inning, he's probably facing Jose Herrera instead of Adrian Del Castillo, who's been great. He's facing Perdomo either way, and then he's probably facing Randall Grichuk again instead of Jock Peterson. And even though Grichuk hit the home run earlier, I got to tell you, I'd rather have that matchup. So I would have kept Peterson in the game. I really would. I don't think there was any sign to take him out. And whenever I first guess, second guess, whatever you want to call it, Carlos Mendoza, there are different tiers to it. There's the tier of, this is egregious, you're an idiot. And then there's the tier of, I disagree, but I'm not going to go crazy about it. This is in the tier of, I disagree, I'm not going to go crazy about it. But that's how good David Peterson is. The fact that he could put together an argument for us that he should have come out and pitched the 8th inning of this game. Instead, Jose Budo does, and Budo had a fine bounce-back performance outside of issuing the walk to Jock Peterson with 2 outs and nobody on, but it quickly got erased because Luis Torrens, as much as he doesn't hit, we get it. Luis Torrens has cooled off, and we certainly saw it in this game when he came up in a couple of big-time spots. He throws everybody out at second base. Speaking of Torrens, so Torrens comes up in the 3rd inning with a runner on first, nobody out, bounces into a double play. He comes up with a runner on second, 2 outs in the 5th inning, and he grounds out. Too early to pinch hit, by the way. 5th inning, at the time they're down 2-1, even though they're losing in the game. To me, 5th inning, I'm not pinch hitting. Here's where I'm thinking about it. It's the 7th inning. Mets have tied the game, so does change things a little bit. It's a 2-2 game. J.D. Martinez led off with that blue pit. Advanced to second on a ground out by Iglesias. Runner on second, 1 out. Jeff McNeil fails against the lefty. Arizona went to a lefty. Important to point that out. A.J. Puck came into the game. And now you got a runner on second, 2 outs, or I think a runner on third, 2 outs. Either way, you have a runner in scoring position with 2 outs. And you have Luis Torrens. It's the 7th inning. You have your entire bench available. You have Alvarez, you have Bader, you have Taylor, and you have Vientos. And in that spot, I would have pinch hit for him. I would have gone for the jugular. I don't know how many more opportunities I'm going to have. I don't think you have that many guys that, to me, I'm pinch hitting for, that I'm aggressively pinch hitting for. Obviously, it depends on the pitching matchup. But Mark Vientos is my best hitter off the bench. Why not? What am I waiting for? What am I afraid of? What am I saving him for? That's the other question you have to ask yourself. What are you saving him for? If you don't use him in a tie game in the 7th inning, there are a couple, like Winker you may pinch hit for against the lefty. But outside of that, I'm not pinch hitting for, in my opinion, anyone else in this lineup but Torrens. And who knows if Torrens gets another at-bat. So, again, first guess, I would have gone Mark Vientos to pinch hit for Torrens. He keeps Torrens in the game. He strikes out. Luckily, it doesn't matter because in the 9th inning of this game, Jesse freaking Winker, he doesn't play all the time, but Jesse Winker has already produced more big hits as a trade deadline acquisition than Daniel Vogelbach, Darren Ruff, and Tyler Naquin all combined. He hit that game winner about a week ago, and he gets the leadoff double, the 1-out double in the 9th inning. And there's Jose Iglesias in a little bit of a slump, tiny bit of a slump. 0 for his last 9, 0 for his last 10, whatever it is, coming through with what turned out to be the game-winning RBI single. And then he steals second base. Mets can't cash it in because McNeil struck out. But 2 guys who led to the game-winning run. Jesse Winker, 1-out double. Thank you, David Stearns. Jose Iglesias, RBI single. The back of the Met position player roster coming through. Can't forget Lindor. Lindor's 11-pitch at-bat in the 6th inning was tremendous. A wonderful at-bat. And it caps off with a game-tying home run in the 6th inning. This was a very, very impressive win when you think about it. And I know this is so weird to say considering how bad Sunday's loss was and how bad the loss was the other night. And it was bad. There's no sugarcoating it. But this team went out and just had a successful run. They just had a successful beginning to this road trip. I mean, I have to admit that. I can't lie. They went 4-3 against San Diego and Arizona. Now, all 4-3s aren't created equal because 2 of those games are games they absolutely blew. Absolutely blew. More so the San Diego game on Sunday than the Arizona game last night. So you go 4-3 against 2 of the hottest teams in baseball, which is great. But I think the 2 reasons why we can't be as giddy as, I don't know, maybe we should be, is the Braves have mostly won. They finally lost on Thursday. So from a standings perspective, it's not like this team was gaining ground. They actually lost ground over the last few weeks. And then the way they lost. The way they lost. It's why, as much as we sit here, and I'll do it in a few minutes about the White Sox coming up, and we say they have to do this or they have to win that amount of games, everything changes based on A, how you win and how you lose, and then B, what the Braves are doing. And thank God the Braves finally lost. Nick Castellanos, my guy, hits a 2-run home run, if you missed it, in the bottom of the 7th inning, and the Braves had a lead, and they blow it to the Phillies, so the Mets are 3 games back. But the Mets just went 4-3 against the Padres and the Diamondbacks. And to extend that further, including Baltimore, so this stretch of games where the Mets went out and played 10 games against the Orioles, against the Padres, and against the Diamondbacks, the Mets went 6-4. It's tough to bitch about that. I can't bitch about it. I can bitch about the 2 losses and how they lost those games, and we can obviously just bemoan to the baseball gods that the Atlanta Braves keep winning. That's all fair. But the Mets just went through the belly of the beast in terms of schedule, and they got out of it. That's the good news. Can I present to you the bad news? And if this makes me a negative Met fan, that's fine. I'm going to call it like it is. Now the New York Mets are playing a bad team. They're not just playing a bad team. They're playing arguably the worst team in the history of baseball. And that makes me feel very uncomfortable. Because what the Mets have done, and we saw it against Oakland, we saw it when they blew the last game against Miami. We've seen it against Miami all season long. I don't need to just give an example of one loss on a Sunday afternoon at Citi Field. The Mets have played down to their competition all season long. And this is the ultimate. This is the absolute ultimate in potentially playing down to your competition. And that's the Chicago White Sox. So am I confident? Why would any Met fan be confident? And I hate to say this. I said this about the Yankees a few weeks ago. It's so true, though. You have to sweep this team. Anything short of a sweep is an out-and-out disaster against a baseball team that is record, let me make sure I'm right about this, is 31-104. 31-104. And the Met broadcast played a little bit of a graphic, if you missed it, to show you that as bad as the White Sox are, sweeping a series is really tough, that road teams have swept 3-game series, I guess, at an 8% clip. 8%. Sweeping a 3-game series in general at a 23% clip. So the moral of the story is, as much as they need to sweep the Chicago White Sox, it's very tough to sweep a team, even the Chicago White Sox. But they have to sweep them. And it's very tough, considering the Mets' history against teams they're supposed to beat, to be riled up with confidence that they're going to do it. We will see Tyler McGill pitching in Friday's game, and that's no excuse. Tyler McGill will probably give the Mets what he normally gives them, 4 2/3 innings, 3 runs. The Mets are facing Jonathan Cannon. They have to bomb him. That's what it comes down to. They're facing Davis Martin on Saturday. Sounds like a made-up character. Sounds like somebody that is a default figure in MLB The Show. He's facing the wildly consistent Jose Quintana. And you really want to win those 2 games, because Sunday's actually the difficult one, because Garrett Crochet, their one true major leaguer, is pitching against Sean Manaea. That's a great pitching matchup, by the way. I don't think anyone would think it based on name value. But when you look at the way both of those left-handers deal, that's a tremendous pitching matchup on Sunday. But the Mets, they got to sweep them. That's the reality. So as good as we look at it with an open mind, as well as this has gone over the last week and a half in terms of winning games and results against really good teams, now you got to beat the worst team ever assembled. And anything short will be a massive disappointment. And here's why. Because if this is May, I don't think I would say that. If this is June, I wouldn't say that. I think what I would say if this is the middle of June and the White Sox, we're still the White Sox, is I'd say, look, of course we want to sweep them, but it's baseball. It's tough. Don't mess around. Don't play with your food. Just win a series. That's what I would say. And I would calm everybody down if that's what they did. But I'll tell you what's different as we approach Labor Day. What's different is that they're 3 games out and there's only, 29 games to go? That's the problem. There's not a lot of time. The Atlanta Braves and the San Diego Padres, I do want to include them, get to that in a few minutes on why they may actually be the more realistic team to catch. Got an email about that a week ago, but it's true, especially when you look at how things have transpired. But because there's so few games left, it's no longer a long-ass season. There's so few games left. And you can't rely on the Atlanta Braves losing and the Chicago White Sox and the San Diego Padres losing. You have to win these games badly. You have to win these games more so than you would ever have to win these games in May or June. So the pressure's on. Can the Mets do it? I certainly hope so. But if we're all being honest, this is what they do. They play down to their competition. They cannot afford to play down to their competition. They have to beat the crap out of the Chicago White Sox. As far as the standings are concerned, again, I want to thank the Philadelphia Phillies, and hopefully they'll do more help for the Mets. Another reason why this is so important, Mets are 3 games out. The Mets, to me, have to be is too strong. I don't want to use have to be. It's a pennant race. Things can change very quickly. I would be disappointed if the Mets aren't a game out coming back to Citi Field on Monday. The Braves have 3 more games against the Phillies. The Mets are playing 3 games against the White Sox. Can they pick up 2 games in the next 3 days? Which means, look, it's simple. You sweep the White Sox, the Braves lose 2 out of the next 3 games. You do that, they're a game out. And that's where I want them to be. And anything else, I'll be disappointed. I'm not going to cry. It doesn't mean it's the end of the world. Obviously, if there's still 3 out or more, it's a disaster. If they're 2 out, it's like, all right, they picked up a game. But this is the opportunity to pick up ground. Let me get to the Padres for a second. So what the Mets were able to accomplish on this West Coast trip is they now own the tiebreakers against both San Diego and Arizona. The Mets are still 6 games back of the Diamondbacks. That's a big nut to crack. So despite having the tiebreaker against Arizona, 6 games, a lot of games to make up. Sure, the Diamondbacks can cool off. I get that. But it feels very unrealistic. The Padres, on the other hand, there is a 4-game difference. 4 in the loss column. It's a little bit more in the win column. So it's really 5 games out. But I'm looking at the loss column because you can make up wins. You can't make up losses. They're 4 games behind San Diego with the tiebreaker. So if you can finish tied with the Padres, you have a chance to, you'll be ahead of them, technically. Right now, San Diego is 1 ahead of Atlanta in the loss column. When you look at San Diego's schedule, it's not the most difficult thing in the world, but it ends in a very difficult way. They are about to play the Rays in Tampa. They're about to play Detroit and San Francisco at home. Pretty kind of tricky run considering the way the Tigers have played. Tigers and Giants have played well. They have 2 in Seattle, 3 in San Francisco. Not easy. But listen to the end of the season. This is where it's really tough. Because, look, I don't want to diminish the Giants and the Tigers. They have played reasonably well. No guarantee that's going to last. They play 3 against the Astros, who are fighting for the American League West. 3 against the White Sox. That's unfortunate. And then they end the season with 3 in LA and 3 in Arizona. How about that? And I know, Hoff, you talked about that, I think, a few days ago. I think you mentioned that they end the season in Arizona. I forget the context. Maybe it was a Diamondback context that they play each other. It's the only times they play each other. But when you look at that entire schedule, that is not an easy slate for the San Diego Padres.
Well, that's what I was making a point of. It's like the Mets are going back and forth winning games, but there's still a chunk of this season that Diamondbacks and Arizona are going to kill each other off. Like, they're going to fight for those last 3 games. Plus, you said the Dodgers too, right? They're all playing the Dodgers. I mean, they're fighting for a division as well. It's not like they're rolling up and saying, "Hey, it's all locked up. We're good to go." So, honestly, there's a lot more in the Mets' favor that the Diamondbacks and the Padres are not going to go out there and put up like 20 wins over the last month of the season.
I'd feel better about that if they played more than 3 times, like, because we have the new divisional format. They're only playing that final series, and who knows if that series is even going to matter. One advantage in catching Atlanta is that the Mets have the head-to-head. They've got 3 games against them, and not that any of us in their right mind think the Mets are sweeping the Atlanta Braves in Atlanta, but as long as you're within 3 games, there's that sense of, hey, it's right there. We don't even need help. As long as you get to that series 3 games out, it's right there for you. The problem is, I don't think any of us think they're sweeping the Braves. 2 out of 3, sure. But and by the way, if you win 2 out of 3, you're only making up 1 game, which is why I've always felt, get me to that series a game out. Just get me there a game out. I certainly feel that way today. But certainly San Diego has come back a little bit with these losses to St. Louis, and 4 games back in the loss column makes them feel like they're another target here in this wild card race. But credit to this Met team. We were all devastated last night, Thursday night, Wednesday night, whenever the hell it was, after that brutal loss. And they responded not only by winning, but by winning a game that was not easy to win and winning a series that was not easy to win. So much like the GIF that is The Undertaker, the Mets rise from the dead again. Let me get to some of your emails here. The RicoB@gmail.com. Let's see. Where do we go? Willis writes, only the Mets could find a way to make a 4-3 stretch at San Diego and Arizona feel like a failure. Could be an interesting month. It doesn't feel like a failure. It just doesn't feel as good as it would have felt if they didn't blow 2 games. So I wouldn't say failure, but it could have felt better. Ron writes, as a loyal listener of the Rico and a lifelong Mets fan, but I have to be honest, I have no idea how to feel right now. They split the series with San Diego. They won the series against Arizona. That's good, right? Realistically, we should have went 6-1. Instead, we went 4-3 and are still a full series behind the Braves. It's a successful trip, I guess, but why do I feel like we lost this trip? We know why, because Edwin Diaz. I consider myself a positive Met fan and optimistic, but if they do not sweep the Chicago White Sox, we are not making the playoffs. I will continue to watch and root for my team regardless, but this is a must-sweep series. Do the Mets have the balls to get it done, or is this another wasted season? I think if I gave everybody truth serum, I'll take the truth serum to start. And I ask you this question, and I get asked this question every Rico now until the end of the season. Do you think the Mets are going to make the playoffs? I think more people than not would say no. Most people are not positive Tommy or positive Hoff. Most people are not that. And I was even doing that with a Twitter poll over the last few weeks. I would put that out there, are the Mets going to make the playoffs? If we do that temperature check every day or every series, you're going to see, myself included, that we're not exactly brimming with confidence for a myriad of reasons. Not necessarily anti-Met reasons. A lot of it, as I pointed out, is Atlanta or San Diego or the state of this National League wildcard race. But all of us will still watch. So I think it's a must sweep too. But I can walk you through a scenario where they win 2 out of 3 and the Mets are 2 games out because the Braves just had a random 4-game losing streak. And what are we? We're coming home against the Red Sox saying, we screwed up? No, it'll be a missed opportunity. Sure, there'll be disappointment. But that's the thing about musts throughout a season. It isn't really a must until it's a must. You know what I mean?
Well, and here's the other thing too, is we've, as Mets fans, we've seen the worst of it all. We've seen the collapses. We've seen the seven game lead in 17 games disappear. Well, guess what? Like, it happens on the other end too, where other teams collapse and then rise to the occasion and break through and make the playoffs. Between the Padres, the Braves, and the Diamondbacks, and the Mets even, odds are that one of those teams are going to fall off. The problem is, we've seen the resilience of the Mets recently. I don't think it's going to be them. So that's why I feel a bit more confident in this whole stretch.
Lindor said something after the game, and he said it, we all know it, but it's also another reason why I want the playoffs so badly, as we all should. Lindor was asked about the success against Arizona, against San Diego. I mean, let's have winning season series against both teams, and should have won both series, but they won the Arizona series. And Lindor said it shows we can compete with anybody, and it's why all you have to do is get into this postseason, and you never know. And I think with this team, even though a lot of people have been skeptical of that, when we sat here in March saying, hey, make the playoffs with 85 wins, you never know. That you never know feels realer when you watch what this team has done against good teams, because they have played very well against good teams. Problem is you don't get bonus points for that. You got to beat everybody. You got to beat bad teams. Good. Beating the White Sox will earn you the same win as beating Arizona, but in the back of your mind, it's why missing the playoffs to me will be even more bittersweet, because this team has shown you, wow, they can go to Arizona and beat the Diamondbacks. Wow, they can go to San Diego and compete with the Padres. Let's hear from Negative Dan. Negative Dan writes, season saved part 782. The team is addicted to putting their season on the brink and then pulling one out of their ass to keep it on life support. Cue the, see, they took the series. The run starts now. All we have to do is sweep possibly the worst team in baseball history, and we're right there. Meanwhile, they are now 4-11 after wins since the Kodai Senga died game, and are 4-5 against the Angels, Rockies, and A's. So I'm sure the White Sox sweep will definitely happen. As Positive Tommy is booking his World Series tickets instead of the trip to Cancun, he and his team will both be taking. P.S. Can't wait for Nimmo comments about how good other teams are, and you're going to lose games, but we played great baseball. The other teams just do more after they dropped the first one to the White Sox with their season slipping away. Is he telling any lies? Is he? For as well as they've played against Arizona and San Diego, and they could beat anybody, like I just said, that's the worry going into the Chicago series. They've also shown they can lose to anybody. And hopefully we're wrong. Hopefully on Sunday night, late Sunday night, it's going to be a late Rico. Sorry about that. On late Sunday night, maybe Monday morning it's that late. I can't promise you. On late Sunday night, hopefully we're talking about a sweep. And we're not bemoaning the fact that they missed an opportunity, because this is a great opportunity that's right in front of them. Tyler McGill is going to start the opener. Hopefully he can give him 5 or 6 solid innings. Jose Quintana will start game 2. And then Sean Manaea will start game 3 of this series against the White Sox. And then they come home right away and play Boston. So no rest, no waiting. It's right back to Citi Field, where they barely play baseball games. They have barely played baseball at Citi Field. So it'll be good to have them back home.
Let me ask you a question, because it is the final stretch. It's the final month. The dog days are over. Like, what is it going to take for this team to, I guess, do they need to hit a second gear here? Do they have to take it more serious the next month? Like, what is it going to take?
They got to win 90 games. That's been the number I've been sticking at for a while, and to put in perspective how difficult that's going to be, that means they have to go 20-8 over the next 28 games to get to 90. If you don't believe it's going to take 90 wins, then it'll take a little bit less, right? Then they don't have to go 20-8. Maybe they have to go 18-10. But I do kind of think that's where they have to go. To give you perspective on that, for the Atlanta Braves to win 90 games, they would have to go 17-11. And I think they are going to go 17-11. So they need a hot streak. The Mets have played 500 baseball for a long time. That's why Negative Dan's right. They respond great to these brutal losses, but they need more than that. They need to win 8 out of 10. They need a winning streak. This is not going to be enough. Playing 500 baseball is not going to be enough. That's going to let you finish this season 84-78. And I'm telling you right now, that's not going to be enough. So they need to get red hot. This feels like the time to do it. Win 3 in a row against the White Sox. come back at home with a 4-game winning streak playing Boston and Cincinnati. They have to go into their second gear. And I think what that means, if you're looking for specifics, less off days for your better players, like Mark Vientos not playing. Give me a break. He's got to be out there every day. Pushing your reliable bullpen arms. That seems like an oxymoron. Who's their reliable bullpen arms? They don't seem to have many, but I think you are going to have to see guys pitch 3 straight days, as Carlos Mendoza indicated was a possibility. Look at Friday's game. Is Edwin Diaz available? I would argue he needs to be. He didn't throw that many pitches in saving this game on a Thursday afternoon. And if I got to hear, well, David Peterson was on short rest kind of because it was a day game, well, then vice versa for Diaz tomorrow night. He's on longer rest, right? You want to play that game? It's more than 24 hours. So things like that, you need to be a little bit more desperate because these games are so damn important.
Well, that's why I didn't say it yesterday, but Jose Budo should have been available yesterday. I know that he pitched a lot of pitches on Sunday, but like he should have been available yesterday too. Like you need, listen, he wasn't Edwin Diaz was the problem yesterday. That you weren't going to change. But the fact is, you're right. Everyone should be available. And you know what would really help right now? Pete Alonso is 1 home run away from having another 30 home run season. That means he's 11 away from having a 40 home run season. It'd be really nice to have that hot streak come for Pete Alonso in September.
Yeah, you tell me Pete finishes with 40, I'd feel pretty good about the way this season is going to conclude. But it's a great sign that Lindor is not slowing down. You know, Lindor had a 1-hit game. He only went 1 for 4. But think about how important that hit was, that 11-pitch home run. So hopefully he can keep it up. So 3 games coming up against the Chicago White Sox. We're not planning any Rico Brognas other than the series recap on Sunday, but you never know. Sometimes a brutal, brutal loss or a great, great victory warrants an instant reaction like we gave you throughout this Arizona series. So keep tuned, whether it's to my social media or Pete's social media. We'll try to give you some heads up if we are going to do a Rico, but we'll be here Sunday after the Mets wrap up their 3-game series against the Chicago White Sox. You could always email the pod to ricob@gmail.com to keep interacting with us.
And listen, and things inspire Evan in different ways. But I do want to get a couple voicemails in because we haven't gotten voicemails in a couple podcasts. So,
all right, fine.
Listen, yesterday's game had a ton of reaction, so I have 2 I picked out. So here we go.
Hey, Evan and Hoff. Just want to say I really love your Ricos, and I'm finally inspired to call in and give a voice message concerning last night and the worst loss of the season, which as soon as we see Diaz walk the first guy, we knew it was probably coming. This from years and years and years of Met fandom experience. Evan, I'm about to age your dad, so I've seen it all, and most of it isn't good. And I just want to mention, which might not have been picked up or not, about Gary Cohn mentioning that this may be the 3rd or the 4th time that Diaz has been asked to pitch, and that Diaz is pitching 2 innings this year. First of all, he's on his first batter. He has yet to pitch a 2nd inning, which Gary Cohn, you may notice, he didn't pitch a 2nd inning because he gave it up in the course of 3 batters. It's ridiculous. And then we get to the 9th inning, and Gary and Keith are talking about how they're down by 3. You should at least take a pitch. And there goes Pete Alonso. I don't know if he thinks he's going to hit a 3-run homer. That's a leadoff batter. He swings at the first pitch and flies out to right, with Keith even remarking, "Oh, my." And last of all, Evan, drunk Rico was 100% right. This team is just hopeless. It just continues to disappoint and snatch a good win with a horrible defeat, or flip a good win into a horrible defeat. Anyways, keep up the good work. I realize most of the Ricos soon won't have much of a purpose other than to be thinking about next year and how we lost this year with last night's death of a season loss. All right, guys. Thanks for your work. Take care.
Ah, boy. A lot there. Number one, I completely agree. I don't want to hear about, boy, Edwin's in a tough spot trying to pitch 2 innings. He didn't pitch 2 innings. He got 1 out. And here's the beautiful part about going to a closer in the 8th inning of a game. And I've said this a lot. So this is not the first time. If Edwin Diaz gets that out and gets through the 8th inning, you don't necessarily have to have him pitch the 9th inning. You just may be making the decision, I'm going to use my best chip in the 8th inning to get this big out, and I'll figure something else out for the 9th inning. Now, clearly that wasn't their game plan last night or Wednesday night, but you're not committing to having to get 5 outs. Things can change that. So that is no excuse. No excuse whatsoever. And Edwin has already proven to us he can pitch in the 8th inning or the 7th inning or the 9th inning. So I believe him that it was a mechanical thing. That's why what I said the other day was, even if he comes in for a clean inning in the 9th inning, if he was going to be pitching like that, he was going to walk the first 2 guys and then give up a 3-run home run. I mean, everything probably would have played out the same. Pete swinging at the first pitch. Drives me nuts too. You're down by 3 in the 9th inning. I think there should be a rule that you never swing at the first pitch. But that's not a Pete Alonso thing. That's an everybody thing. Who doesn't swing at the first pitch? Guys are looking for a pitch to hit. They're looking for a pitch to drive. And even down 2-3, multiple runs, guys are doing that. So I agree that it drives me nuts. It drove me nuts the other night. But I have become so used to it that that's what guys just do.
And finally, I think this is an important one for you of how we should rate worst losses and best wins.
Evan, love the Rico, brother. You and Hoff do a great job. I just listened to your worst loss of the season episode, the Diaz, Carroll, walk-off grand slam, all that. You mentioned that you keep having to switch the title for worst loss of the season when it comes to games. I think that you should just do what Dave Portnoy does when it comes to rating pizza, where he never gives out a 10 just in case the next day he has a pizza that is actually better than that one he just gave a 10. So maybe you should do something like that where you either rate the game how bad it hurt or stung, and just don't name anything the worst loss of the season, because then maybe you're even jinxing it to have the base.
I don't know if he cut off, but I certainly have the point on that. Yeah, I think the problem we all have is that there are 28 games left in the season. Any game they lose is now going to move up the mountain of worst loss of the season. It always gets worse the later it is. It always does. So I always say, as of now, the worst loss of the year, we know that's going to change. And trust me, come the middle of October, once the Mets are eliminated, hopefully later than that, maybe earlier than that, probably earlier than that, we will have a podcast rating and ranking all the atrocious losses from this past season. And the great wins, too. We'll be positive as well. That's for our off-season Rico Brognas, before we do 35 different Juan Soto podcasts, which will be coming your way, but hopefully much, much, much later on.
Hey, by the way, I just heard that you and Sean got into an argument about doing a late night Rico on Christmas Eve if Juan Soto signs or whatever.
Yeah,
I'm 100. Of course, we're doing that.
Of course, we have a microphone in our home. We turn it on. We talk about it for 25 minutes. I mean, it's not the end of the world. We're not canceling Christmas because we're going to talk about Juan Soto for a few minutes. Give me a freaking break.
No, Marash said, "Well, what? I'm going to be blitzed." I'm like, "Well, that's even better."
Yeah,
that's it.
I may be blitzed too. It's okay. I'm my own most honest, obviously, during a drunken Rico. All right, well, we appreciate the voicemails. You can always leave us one at 725-222-8699. I think that's the number, 725-222-8699, or drop us an email, thericob@gmail.com. Thank you very much for subscribing, listening, viewing, enjoying, hating, whatever the hell you do with Rico Brogna.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Rico Brogna podcast. It's amazing, isn't it? Make sure you download it now to keep it on you at all times.